What's going on, viewers? Shred the Gamer here, and today I wanted to make a video on how I got into turn-based RPGs or JRPGs or whatever you want to call them. This is a genre of gaming that I enjoy very much. Even though it's still very large, I feel that it's kind of fading away a little bit. Like, it's starting to become niche, and a lot of the big companies out there are not really pushing them like they did in the 90s, where the area of gaming where I grew up in the PS1. So I just kind of wanted to talk about how I got into them, because it's kind of I think it's kind of an interesting story. But so let's kind of get into it. So the first RPG I ever saw for the first time was this game right here, Final Fantasy VII. And you know, everyone knows about the hype and everything and how blown up it was. And obviously, for me, I was all excited about it. And then my brother, he's the one who had a PlayStation. I didn't have a PlayStation at the time, so I played on his. He rented it, and I was just like, when he had it, I was like, oh, Final Fantasy VII, oh, that game's awesome. I was like, the graphics are amazing and everything, you know, blah, blah, blah. Because I was going, you know, what I heard about it. And, you know, I was like, yeah, it looks like this, like the whole game right here. You know, like right here, where they show. It's like, yeah, like that's the graphics of the whole game, because back then, like, that looked really pretty sweet with, you know, Seth Roth and his mother. And I was like, yeah, this is so awesome. So then we pop it in and we play it, and we're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. And we're like, the heck's this? Okay, getting off a train, and then we're like, what kind of graphics are these? I'm like, this doesn't seem right. Is this Final Fantasy VII? And we're all playing it, and we're running around, and we're like, okay. And then all of a sudden you run into a battle, and we're like, what's this? And then you're like, oh, this is a fight scene? And you're like, oh, okay. Attack, and you click attack, and you're like, and then he's like, whoosh, and you're like, huh? What? That's how you fight? That's the action of the game? You're like, you know, because we're seeing this for the first time, RPG in general. I was like, that was like, really? I don't know about this. And then we're going around, and they're like, oh, you gotta read all this stuff? We're like, oh man, I don't know about this. And you're like, you know what? This game sucks. Like, after about a half hour, I was like, this game was supposed to be so awesome. It was all blown. Like, this game sucks. It's horrible. I was like, take it back. So we took it back. And my brother's like, yeah, this is a horrible game. And the graphics are terrible. What the heck? I don't understand. So from there on, I hated Japanese RPGs or turn-based RPGs. I like to call them turn-based. So turn-based RPGs, I was just like, never again. And then I ran into my neighbor and friend, Jeremy, who was a couple of doors down. He's kind of like, if you watch Happy Console Gamer, how he always talks about his friend Andrew. Well, my friend Jeremy was kind of like my friend Andrew, you could say. He didn't have like everything, but he had way more than I had. So he brought out, you know, RPGs and Final Fantasy, and I'm like, oh, those are so stupid. You like stand there and you attack, and you got all this reading. And he's like, oh man, there's no. He's like, no. He's like, it's, you know, a lot more than that. He's like, one thing, the stories are really in depth, and you know, they're magical and amazing, and a lot of times they come with amazing music. You level up, and you know, it's role playing, and you play as a role, and all this, you know. And he just kept going on, and I was just, I don't know, like, I was like, really, like, he made me interested. I'm like, oh. So we went over to his house. He actually popped in this game here, Legend of Legaia. Okay. When I saw this, I was like, okay. And it had like martial arts type thing, and I was really into martial arts. You know, Bruce Lee's like my favorite. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll look at it again or something. I don't know. You know, it seemed interesting. So I don't know. As time went on, we were playing basketball one day, and I had to leave. So as I was walking away, and he was still on the court, and I walked away because it was in a churchyard. I walked away. I don't know. I was probably like 50 feet away. And I don't know, he thought he'd be funny by lobbing a glass bottle at me. And just to kind of like spook me, like, oh, what the heck, a glass bottle. But it ended up hitting me in the back of the head. And I was like 12 years old or whatever. And I started to cry. And I was like, oh, you jerk, man. Why'd you do that? And he's like, oh, man, I feel so bad. And I was like, I hate you. And he's like, you know what? He's like, hey, you can borrow all my PlayStation stuff. And I was like, yeah, huh? Okay, yeah. Because I didn't have a PlayStation. So he let me borrow all his PlayStation stuff. And what did I do? I popped in Legend of Legaia. And I played it, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, this is great. Then I popped in Final Fantasy VII, and tried that again, and I got a couple hours into that, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. I was like, yeah, I guess I just needed to give it more of a chance, just really get into it. And then I played Final Fantasy Tactics, and I was like, oh, this is crazy, because he was telling me about Final Fantasy Tactics, and I was like, wow. And then a week later, I had to take it all back, because he's like, all right, I need my stuff back. And I'm like, oh, okay. But the cool thing is he ended up giving me his PlayStation. He had another one that was broken. He ended up giving that to me. So I actually got my own PlayStation. I just had to flip it upside down. So now that I finally got my PlayStation, what game do I tell my parents to get me for Christmas? Legend of Legaia. Of course. I freaking loved it and played the heck out of it and put like 60 to 70 hours into it, trying to level up everything as much as I could. I don't know, I just fell in love with RPGs after that, and then I was all about trying to play as many RPGs as I could, and I got into Final Fantasy VIII, and then the Xenosaga, Legends of Dragoon, you know, I could go on and on. So yeah, for me, I didn't like them right away. My nephews, they don't like them either. They're like, oh, you just stand there, and I felt that way. Since I'm, making this video on how I got into RPGs, I guess I could say to any newcomers out there, ones that are not sure about RPGs or not sure if they want to get into them. The only downside, and it's not really a downside, but is that they're long and they take a lot of time and patience. They're mainly for younger, back in high school and middle school, or high school, middle school. It was a lot easier to play RPGs, so it's good for, as an adult, a little bit more challenging. Kids out there that are watching this, they want a game that takes a long time and you get your money's worth. I was like, grab a Japanese RPG or a turn-based RPG and put some time into it. Put a 5-10 hours into it, and you might end up liking it. At first, you might not, just because you stand there and you attack. But try to learn the story, get into the story, understand maybe the combat system, that sort of thing, and just give it some time. That's what I did. I just sat down and said, what? It's like my friend Jeremy says that it's unbelievable, or they're unbelievable. I'll give it a try, and maybe it's just a matter of you got to find that right one. I started with Final Fantasy, the greatest game of all time, right? Final Fantasy VII at the time, and I thought it was horrible. And then I put in a niche game like Legends of Legaia, and I was like, this is unbelievable. And then after that, I love Final Fantasy VII because it's like I understood it and just was into it and that sort of thing. So I don't think turn-based RPGs is something that will ever go away. It'll always be there, but I'm just used to it being more mainstream in my time. And now it's kind of becoming more of a niche thing. Kind of hope that it would, some of the, a lot of the big companies like Square, all we get is Final Fantasy. Square has a huge catalog of turn-based RPGs that they could bring back, and they don't. They just bring Final Fantasy because that's the biggest name that they got, and it's just, to them, it's not worth to bringing anything because they're becoming such niche. We got to rely on companies like Atlas and Xseed to, give us those, which are really quality games. But a company like Square, if they really try and really care, no one could touch them. No one can touch Square when it comes to that sort of thing. I don't know, I just wanted to make this video, and I guess at this point maybe I could recommend to some of you kids out there that might be watching this that are not, maybe don't like turn-based RPGs, and would maybe have influenced you to maybe give it a try, and maybe I can recommend games to play. If graphics don't bother you, if you're someone that's like, well, I don't care if the graphics are old or outdated, Legend of Legaia, I would start there. That's where I started. But if you're someone that wants better graphics, high definition and all that, and if you can't get around all that and maybe doesn't want reading and all that, I would recommend Tales of Xillia or any Tales game. I think that would be a good start for someone to get into these type of turn-based. It's kind of a, it's like a mixture of, Kingdom Hearts type of thing. It's not quite as like Final Fantasy VII. And then, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying this. Alright, but here we go. Final Fantasy 13! I know. Okay, yes, Final Fantasy 13. And the reason why is, alright, here's the thing. With Final Fantasy 13, if you're gonna try it, it's cheap. It's like you can get it for $5 right now. Get the strategy guide and read how to do the combat system. A lot of people hate the game for the combat system. Yeah, the story is all over the place, but the combat system, I think, was a big turnoff, and people are, they say that it's broken and everything, and I didn't get that out of it. And I think it's because I got the strategy guide and I read everything about the combat system, how it works, and you have to be very particular with it. At first I was all over the place and like, man, this concept, you know, at first it was just all over the place. So then I just started reading the strategy guide and understanding it, and then I kind of get it, and then I'm like, okay, and you know, it's kind of interesting. The reason why I recommend it is it's a little bit more action, a little bit more back and forth, you know, with everything, and it's just a lot more action. So I would recommend Final Fantasy 13 for people that are new to it, and plus it's linear, so you won't get lost. It's very linear, so you know it's easier. If you're way too into, oh, I gotta have the best graphics, Final Fantasy 13. If you just want high definition and a nice clean look, Tales of Xillia all the way. Tales of Xillia, or any Tales game, is way better than any of the Final Fantasies that have come out right now. You can't go wrong with a Tales game. But if you're just like, you know what, they look too cartoony and too kiddie or whatever, then go ahead with Final Fantasy 13. I hope you enjoyed my story and how I got into them, and hopefully you out there viewers might be interested in getting into turn-based RPGs, because it is a genre that I want to continue to see, and I want the big companies like Capcom, like I want another Breath of Fire. It's like, why can't we get another Breath of Fire? You know, because to Capcom, there's not enough money in it for them. You know, that's why they put it on the cell phone. They're like, oh, we'll put it on the cell phone because like that's a big market right now. Even though that's just a horrible thing for them to do. So hopefully this video does a little something. And if not, then at least I tried. Because RPGs, you know, JRPGs, turn-based RPGs, they're something that have a special place in my heart and I really enjoy. So, and then all the guys that might have watched this that you know, feel the same way that I do, hopefully you enjoyed my story. You might think that it's a little funny or whatever, I don't know. So, anyways, guys, this is Shred the Gamer. And until next time, I will shred you later.